Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to this fourth encounter of the Global Online Forum for the Global Dialogue and Culture Encounter organized by the Pineros Ecclesial Network. Today, we will have a different approach compared to what we have been working since June. Today we want to talk about social and technological innovations in water and sanitation issues. This is practically a different way to address the right to water and hope, thinking about the rationale from the diagnosis to the proposal and the achievement of solutions. Obviously, over the last years, there has been a major innovating mark. We are convinced that innovation is an efficient process as soon as it involves a change process. This doesn't involve creating novelties all the time, which can be accepted in a market rationale, but we should raise substantive practice to change habits and practices that have to be optimized for the quality of life we are all worthy of. This meeting is being held on the August 7th, the San Cajetan's Day, so bread and work for everyone. This is something that this pandemic world is going to need urgently. That's why the innovative challenge becomes increasingly more necessary, and there are more questions regarding their sustainability, and we have to think that we have to make this goal achievable. We want to thank the institutional attendees that are permanently endorsing these initiatives: UNOVA, USADA, the United Nations Office for Social Projects, and the Foundation of Sanitary Workers in the framework of their university program. We are going to give the floor to Gabriela so we can understand how this forum is going to be developed. We want to greet Secretary of National Policies in our country. Good morning, Jaime. Now we have full attendance, have all the panel members, and now, Gabriela, the floor is yours. Well, thank you, Luis. Welcome you all. Welcome to this international forum. For those of you who have just joined in this forum, my name is Gabriela Saco. I'm the Executive Board of Institute for Global Dialogue and the Culture Encounter. Today we have 10 speakers in this forum, so we'll have 5 two-speaker panels, and questions and answers will be addressed after each panel with 10 minutes intended to that effect. As there are too many of us in this forum, and it's very interesting to listen to all of us, we have to stick to a timetable. And those of you who have pending issues, you can send them later to by mail to forosdelagua@.org. And if we stick to the practices developed in the previous forum, I'm going to name the speakers and the order in which we will speak. After the introduction, after Alfredo Ferros from REPAM, Colombia, the Pineros Ecclesial Network, we will hear from Jaime Percy, the Secretary of University Policies. In the second panel, and after the Q&A session, we will be hearing from Gabriela Carolini, Associate Professor in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at the MIT, the Institute of Technology of Massachusetts in the United States. And then we'll listen from Adriano Stringini, member of the Executive Board of SABEPS. It's a water and sanitation company in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Next, we will hear Diego Berger in the third panel. He's a special project coordinator for Mekorot from Israel. And then we'll hear from Jaime Gutierrez Bajo, CEO from RUMA. He's a sustainability and citizens participation in Spain. And he's also working with us in regulation and water program. The fourth panel will hear from Christian Taylor, the president of ADIS Argentina. And then we'll hear from Hector Garcia from IHE Delft in the Netherlands. And then in the last, and after the last, before the last Q&A session, we'll move to the next and fifth panel, where we'll hear from Elena Christoforis. This is a Professor of Hydrometeorological Risk at the University of Turin, and then we'll hear from Patrick Thompson, lead researcher for the Oxford University in the United Kingdom. Just like in the previous forum, we have a group of experts from different parts of the world to whom we want to thank for their proposals and thoughts and for sharing their knowledge and the opening to dialogue to the different topics we will be addressing. Before starting at the last remark, some organizational issues. Remember that there is simultaneous translation in this forum, so each one of you can choose the language in which you will be listening to the meeting, in Spanish or in English, and the speakers, please choose the channel in which you will be speaking, okay? And please, attendees are requested that while presentations are being made, please write your questions in the Q&A section. In the Q&A section, I repeat, so we can ask those questions to the speakers, okay? And on the other hand, it is important that you take into account that we only take questions in the Q&A, not those questions written in the chat section. Those that start joining us, please, when you join us, include your name and country of origin, so when you ask questions, we know where you come from. So we'll be clarifying some organizational issues. Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you, Gabriela. Now keep greeting the participants. Now we'll give the floor to Alfredo Ferro from the REPAM. Where is Alfredo? These things happen in the Zoom platform, you know. Perfect. You are there. So I can, it's a ghost slip with presence. I can see your voice, but I cannot see you. But these things are interesting in the REPAM. We greet Cardinal Claudio Umes that presides this online forum that we are doing this year. And we hope this experience will be useful for Vatican's seminars in next year regarding the right to water, right to home. Alfredo Ferro, the floor is yours, so you can make your presentation. Alfredo? Can you all hear me? Yes, we can hear you perfectly well. Well, I want to greet everyone. Unfortunately, we don't have an internet connection at the Amazon region, so I am using my cellular phone. Sometimes I have problems, I have to log in and out, but I hope you will understand it. On behalf of the Panamazon Ecclesial Network, I want to greet all participants in this forum, and I would like to start my presentation by saying that if we take into account these four objectives that we have to work on, proposals that consider the present challenges and address different approaches, I would like to say these brief minutes I have, in addition or apart from the technical innovations, I want to refer to a poetic and spiritual meaning of water, but we have to have a down-earth approach. We have to think about our deep roots, you know. We have to accept that not only technical and social innovations are a guarantee to troubleshoot the water problem. I want to read a text written by a guy in Brazil that goes as follows. Water is the item that we need. All our is in our spirit, and that is shown in the waves and winds. In the Amazon region, the spirit is in the river, and it can be strongly seen in the effluents. Never enter a river or a boat without greeting the water spirit. Water has different kinds of values or dimensions as a social life foundation that demands social and political control, depending on the management and control over water. In all religions and spiritual tradition, water has a rich meaning that goes over its material meaning for all cultures and people. Water is signal and expression of life and is part of the paramount rites and celebrations. Water has a strong symbolism and a sacred dimension. In most of religions, water as a sacred gift has a purifying, renovating, and liberating and fertilizing meaning. Asian and African people consider it as part of their divinities. Sources are sacred. One of the most well-known goddesses in the Afro religions having an impact in Brazil is the goddess Emanjá, that for believers is expression of the divine presence. For many of the Aborigines peoples, the water is a gift of divinities. Many of traditions assert in their myths that the human being was created out of God, or it came out of water to take care of nature. Other traditions say that water is the point of meeting between the earth and the heaven. Water belongs to the real and symbolic heritage of all cultures and religions. In all the planet, the human being protects the fulfillment of hopes, fears, the promise of life and death. The fact that water for major cultures has this sacred dimension is a radical criticism to the capitalist notion in which we move around, where water is one more good, and that's why it is it is possible to privatize it and to have a profit good, but it should be respected and taken care of. So I would like to focus my presentation above all in Pope Francis and the Amazon Church regarding water. I'm going to refer to two documents, the Synod document, final document, and the Amazon, dear Amazon, in the encyclical letter Laudato Yes. I want to refer to these major aspects in those documents, and apart from the theory and words, commit us all. What do these documents tell us primarily? First of all, that water nourishes and sustains nature and the community of Amazon peoples. Water is the major axis connecting life, territory, cultures, communities, and spiritual forces. Water unites us all and does not divide us. As a precious and necessary good, it has been taken care of for many centuries by the Amazon communities. Water is a right. That is to say, the access to drinking and safe water is a basic universal human right acknowledged by the United Nations. Without water, people would not survive. Therefore, it's a condition for the exercise of other human rights. However, this precious good is under threat. The Pope in the Amazon prophetically threatens the infringement of people's human rights, of their territories, of their self-determination, among other reasons, for its privatization. The Pope refers to that injustice and crime. And this has been reported by the Synod, just like the change of the water cycle and the large mega projects of hydro projects. We quote the Pope, he asserts that the water is abundant in the Amazon region, even though it is a vital good for people, it is polluted. And the Synod document, it is regarded as a life source, and the Dear Amazon is characterized by its poetic, symbolic language. That's why it is said that in different arts and in poetry, They were inspired by water, the jungle, and the cultural diversity, and the challenges and ecological social challenges. We refer to a pastoral transformation. The Synod F38, it is asserted that we have discovered that waters from a spirit similar to the Amazon River that that regularly overflow are the ones that are going to lead us to an overabundant life that God offers us to share it in the announcement. Such document asserts that the Amazon is a land of forests and waters, and that's why there is a pressing need to take care of it and to develop it spiritually. And in words of Genesis, we have to confirm that God saw that everything was good. From the cosmovision's spiritual dimensions, the Pope in the ecclesial dream, and dear Amazon, appreciates the mystic of the interconnection of all that has been created, mystic of gratuity, that loves life as a gift, mystic of sacred admiration in light of the nature that offers us so much life. However, he tells us that we have to get that to have a more personal relationship with the you that sustains the reality and wants to make sense to it. A you that loves us. The Pope quotes Pedro Casalda's words. Pedro Casal was almost dying, and he was very ill, and said the following: "Float over me, dead particles, but on the hands of this child who is an expert and conquers the night and the water." It's devastating for me to know that that I am a whole before dying. The Pope subtitles one of his dreams in the Apostolic Declaration. He quotes a leader that is a very well-known work. When he refers to the Amazon water, he says that the rivers and streams are like veins, and all life's form is determined by them. And he also refers to the poet Pablo Neruda. Amazon is capital of the island's patriarchal father, that is a eternity for fertilization. And when Pope Francis affirms that there are many Amazon regions in the territory, even though its major network is the river, and he quotes Brazilian poets, and he says, "It is born all the time. Water shows a sketch and goes down slowly to grow in the land and frighten green areas. Underground waters bloom to waters coming from the Indian regions, from the white clouds, white windy clouds. Since the man inhabits this area, it is filled with the depth of this water." And the Pope in the Apostol document acknowledges the popular poets that fell in love with the immense beauty of the Amazon River and who tried to express what rivers made them feel and the life that they offer. They are poets, the Pope said. They are prophetic poets, and they help us get rid of the technocratic consuming paradigm that destroys nature and leaves us without a decent life, to quote the great Brazilian poet Vinícius de Moraes, who who says the poetry that only poetry with the humility, humbleness of his life can save us all. Francisco highlights the role of poetry, where we share life and beauty. Even though many want to believe that nothing is wrong, and that's why he quotes the Colombian poet Juan Carlos Galeano, where he says, Those who believed that the river was a link to play were wrong. The river is a thin vein in land. The river is a road where animals and trees come from. The river might overflow, and we wash our hands with water and blood. We are asked to have a robust spirituality with new paradigms where water is a good and a paramount reality. This spirituality would have 5 features: humbleness, spirituality, and the acknowledgement of water as a sacred gift, the spirituality of reconciliation, where we can acknowledge our sins in the way we have addressed or dealt with precious goods such as water. And we have to be sober. We cannot have an agreement with consumerism. Spirituality of action that has to boil down to specific actions, and that has to do with the specific daily lives or simple practices, and a comprehensive spirituality where everything is connected and we can have a reflection kind of look of water and nature. With that, even if I am talking about the symbolic, spiritual, poetic aspect of water, in the synod final document, we highlight the need to take on specific commitments that I cannot refer to by now due to time issues. But it is based on the fact that every human being has a right to water. And we have to fight so that settlements and slums have their rights guarantees. And we have to create ministries for preserving water and to enrich ecclesial rights in the way indigenous peoples take care of their territories and relate to water. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alfredo. We know that there are communication technical problems in the Amazon region and due to the COVID pandemic as well. And it's not a minor issue that the Synod projects the creation of an Amazon University, where we will kindly ask the Secretary of University Policies here in Argentina for help. And now we give the floor to Jaime Persig, our Secretary of University Policies. The floor is yours, Jaime. Good morning. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for having me here. And I want to thank you for listening to me for 8 or 10 minutes. And then I will stay and I will be willing to answer questions, if any. And if there are questions that we don't know what the answers are, we'll try to answer them as well. We are invited, and you know that my expertise is not water. That's not my major, you know. Water is not what I have focused on in my life. The innovation and new technological solutions regarding water is enshrined in a general issue at a turning point kind of moment. The present of this humankind. We can see that we have arrived at this present with a history and with a future to be built. And this present time catalyzes transformations, discussions, and reflections that were pre-pandemic in Argentina, before March the 8th, and in this dramatic situation we're living, this catalyzes this impact. We want to deal with contradictions, so I would like to to tell you what our standpoint is. The pre-pandemic approach, and we should think that this pandemic exposes all these discussions even more. These discussions that humankind were having, I believe, they refer to four major transformations that our society was discussing before. And those four major transformations are work and technology. And there is a common sense that we wanted to have and was discussed. We said that it was natural that technology would replace women and men's work. We had to accept that we would be out of work and that work would be replaced with machines. And there were no other research lines and there were no other ideas or discussions. So we had to accept that men and women will be left without work and will be replaced with machines. Part of the people were not going, will become redundant. So we still believe that it is possible, and we have to believe that it is possible to have a full employment society. It's not necessarily true that computers or machines are going to replace us and are going to build a standing army in our population. No, it's not feasible that politics do not address that. It's not possible that universities do not come up with another line of research that it does not involve technology versus human beings. And this is absolutely viable because there is a second transformation, and that is a demographic transformation. Human society in all the world, our country has changed dramatically over the last years regarding the urbanization of our population in the urban concentration. Not only that, but also the distribution of these urban populations where we have ghettos of rich and ghettos of poor people. Rich get together and flow, were forced to live together. That's why in our country we have had major conglomerates where some people live and other major conglomerates where other people live. And this has been built with the social and social economic dynamics in the world that created that with the sequence that can be observed in health, in the water distribution of human rights, and the possibility to exercise our rights. A third major transformation is that of regression, the regressive transformation in the environment, in our common house. The environment degradation, our home degradation, the social aggression linked to this demographic transformation that, as the Pope asserts, gives rise to the major victims, the poor. Poverty and world degradation go hand in hand. And the third major transformation we have to discuss is the gender equality transformation, the transformation of rights on an equal footing for men and women, the transformation of equality of rights. Therefore, if I have some time, I would like to address these issues, rights and responsibilities. And in these four major transformations that the humankind have been discussing with hegemony and anti-hegemonic proposals with coming and goings, at the beginning of this year, at the end of this year, as from March the 3rd, when we had the first COVID case, this became apparent. And why? Because amidst this pandemic, we have economic stagnation and a slowdown of economy. So there will be a world in which the poor will be will be poorer and rich will be richer. The inequality will be larger. We live this inequality in our country, which is not boosted only in the social, but economic, educational, and cultural arenas. The poor are going to be poorer and the rich will be richer. And we believe that the way to address these four major transformations is to have other views, to offer other views. The Pope offers other viewpoint, these major transformations. He has another look. He does not naturalize the aggression to the environment or the replacement or dehumanization of work. Work is a human condition. Work as we know it does not only have to do with doing a task. It has to do with a subject, with a human being working in this society I want to build. And we believe the state has to have a major role in these four major transformations. When we talk about the state and we are invited to speak, it is because we believe that apart from the state in Argentina and many other parts of the world, universities are part of the state. They are by far the institution that produces, systematizes new knowledge. In our country, I think in the world, we have witnessed a discussion on meritocracy. It seems that there is an ideology that is against the ideology of rights, and that is meritocracy. Meritocracy is a discussion of the ancient philosophy. Aristotle said, what's the merit of having a merit? What is the merit of having merit? It's not a capitalism discussion. It's a discussion of human society. What is the merit of having merit? And when we address the idea of rights, what characterizes rights? Perhaps the Spanish we speak in Argentina is not the same as the one that is spoken in other countries. But a liberal idea of rights says, my right ends when yours starts. That is to say that we cannot trespass other people's rights. We are talking about a flat society where we are all equal. And the rights show that one piece links into another piece. We believe that there are rights that are above other rights. I'm just finishing and rounding off my presentation. We believe that there are rights that are above other rights. The weakest have to have their rights protected with social protection above those who have those rights without social protections being necessary. So we could talk about the right to water. In our country, I'm sorry if it's not clear, but I want to say there are fragments of our society that are people that are born with some rights guaranteed because they are born in a certain society sector. They have right to work, education, housing, and health, and they have the right to water. They are born with these rights guaranteed. And there is a part of society, some people that have to fight and get organized to fight for their rights because the market does not guarantee those rights. So we believe in a decisive kind of action. The state is the only one that can offer rights. What the state doesn't provide is available in the market. And the market is not our enemy, but the state does not guarantee, sorry, the market doesn't guarantee rights. The market guarantees the possibility of buying and selling. Now, what we consider is a right, it has to be protected by the state, so it has to be funded, It has to be a universal right. And hand in hand with that right is where the social liability arises. It's very unfair to have a society that wants to guarantee responsibility for all if it's not like that. Rights go hand in hand with responsibilities. And some, the humblest people, in the case of their people, meritocracy asks them for responsibility when their rights are not guaranteed. So we believe that the weakest have to have their rights protected by the state, because rights have to be universal, and responsibilities come from these rights. That can guarantee a decent society for all, a society with responsibilities and rights. That is what guarantees social justice, that will allow a peaceful um, development with sisterhood and solidarity. If I haven't been able to stick to my time slot, I ask you for my apologies. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Alfredo. The Q&A section is open for you to ask questions. And you can also ask questions to the speakers. I think that Jaime and Alfredo's presentations have shown us the center periphery. It has to do with inequalities. In that sense, the innovating thought would be an integrating kind of thought. So based on this view, innovating and integrating allow us to infer to deal with public policies, and in the framework of community to have a cultural discussion in light of the future challenges. I don't know if you, Jaime or Alfredo, would like to make further remarks regarding this issue. Jaime? I would like to make that aspect more explicit. You are referring to a cultural aspect. I think that this water approach has to be comprehensive and has to be interconnected with all realities. What is the view of cultures on water? What is the relationship with water? And in my context, which is the Amazon context, that is paramount, because here where I am at the river bank of the Amazon River, the river and water are paramount. It represents the life for all these communities. So it seems key to me to understand along traditions and history of every culture and people how they have been able to deal with that reality, how they have lived that reality. So for native Indian populations, they feel that water is being sold, that the water is good, and that water is being sold. That is non-understandable, but that is an issue we have to work on. I think it's important to take that into account, but it's also we have to take into account the state's responsibilities. I would only want to say that we have to deal with these cultural aspects that lie behind the water notion, and we have to understand it in these communities with which I am in contact. For them, water is sacred. Water is not a good. Thank you. Jaime, if I have 2 minutes left, I would like to make some remarks. I would like to let you know about two stories that have to do with this discussion, at least in Latin America. Before Argentina was actually Argentina, before it was born as this country where we live and where we were born, in the city of Concepción del Uruguay, Justo José de Urquiza, who was part in the Argentina creation, had a house where there was water. In Buenos Aires, which was the other hub before Argentina was born. This was a discussion between the unitary and the federal people. And Domingo Faustino Sarmiento, who was president of Argentina, was one of the major founders of public education. He traveled to Concepción del Uruguay in the province of Entre Rios in Argentina. And that governor and Argentine captain showed that he had water, and he opened the tap in his house and showed him that he had drinking water. And here in Buenos Aires, we still did not have drinking water. And this is a discussion that humankind dealt with before the setting up of national states, our capitalist state as we know it today. But as water was guaranteed for certain social sectors, it was an invisible discussion. Because as some people have water, they have it. And that seems to be the right. But it was guaranteed by the state. And if it is guaranteed by the state, why doesn't it guarantee that right to other people? Well, for others, the meritocratic society says the others have to fight for it to get that right. They have to get organized, have cooperative associations and work. But the poor have to work. Others don't have to work, have that right guaranteed because they live in a place where the state guarantees that right. Why? Because they have the cultural symbolic power. They also have the merit kind of power to have water. So as Alfredo said, this is a very profound discussion in our society. We have to build and enter into agreements to that effect. So we have to have innovations in public policies. How can we guarantee those rights? What are the rights that we are going to guarantee to our population? What are those rights? What is the basic consensus in our society? Well, innovation could be what agreements do we build as a society? What minimum is guaranteed to everyone just because they live here? In Latin America, there are no agreements or consensus available. Innovation could be or would involve how we can set up right policies that can be guaranteed to everyone, that nobody has a ceiling. There is no consensus on public policies. There is no consensus on funding to this initiative. There is a consensus on funding. And if we talk about rights, we have to refer to funding. Rights exist if they are funded, because rights have a cost. They have to be included in the budget. If they are not included in the budget, they are not rights. They are speech objects, but they are not rights. Your comments are very interesting. We make a distinction between practice and speech, where innovation is a comprehensive process that is based on a dialogue that has to go beyond. And this is a springboard, let's say. Jaime has participated in the other fora, also with Alberto Sileoni. And with him, we have been working on these issues. So we close this first panel. These questions or issues are going to be addressed in the several exhibitions. Now we give the floor to Gabriel. Thank you, Luis. Now we will continue with the exhibitions and the panels. Now we will be opening the second panel with Gabriela Carolini. Gabriela works at the MIT in Boston, the United States. We met some time ago through Visa Nyan, who is the director of the special program for urban development at the MIT. And then we'll hear from Adriano Stringini. We met him some time ago in the seminar on the right to water in the Vatican, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in 2017. And as I said before, he's a member of the executive board of SABES in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Gabriela, the floor is yours. Well, thank you, Gabriela. Thank you. I want to speak, to apologize me because I'm going to speak English because Spanish is not so strong.
Cubed, the number of employees per connection, the duration of water shutoffs or stoppages, things like the physical quality and sustainability of water, so the incidence of turbidity, future volume needed, total freshwater withdrawals, number of service complaints. There's also, of course, increasingly attention to public safety and resilience, so the capacity to prevent physical or cyber threats. There's also attention, of course, to the capacity to respond and recover from natural disasters or man-made disasters. And last but not least, conditions and innovation. So performance benchmarks also look at what are different technologies being used, what are materials being leveraged, are you using the latest technologies and materials in terms of membranes, what is the physical state and age of infrastructure, what are information systems being used, and are they actually coordinated across the board from a spatial and billing aspect, for example. All of these things are important, but what they miss and what they do not center on is exactly for whom and exactly where. So I've been I launched 2 years ago now, I launched a project at MIT, which is exploring a simple proposition, which is essentially making room for spatial equity in and across performance indicators that are already being used among operators in the industry. So what does that actually look like? You can take a number of different indicators or performance indicators that are used by utilities. I focus here on examining water shutoffs. So how do we actually visualize spatial equity? This is a project that looks at different cities across the United States, including Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Duluth, and many others. And what we're doing is essentially looking at how average yearly water shutoffs in the city, where they are actually centered. So in this photo, I don't know how many of you have been to Chicago. I've been once or twice. But what is well known about Chicago is the segregation across the city. So the south end of Chicago is a very heavily African-American population. Neighborhood population is largely communities of color. The population across these areas here is more where folks like Oprah Winfrey live. So this is where wealth is concentrated. This is where wealth is not concentrated. And by actually positioning the indicators that we already know about from operators, namely, again, something like water shutoffs, we can show that there is a concentration of water shutoffs in particular parts of the city. And we can show for whom water shutoffs are a particular problem. So for example, here in this zip code, we have the average yearly shutoffs, but we also know from other data that is collected at a household level from the American Community Survey, the percentage of non-white residents in that particular zip code. We also have a sense of the number of households using customer assistance plans, so payment plans when particularly poor households or elderly households are facing difficulties paying their water bills. We could actually track that and visualize where it is happening and for whom. We also have a sense of the percentage of households who are living in poverty, where water is being shut off. So all of these things essentially help us understand the for whom and the where, which is currently missing in how operators and utilities are essentially gauging their own performance. But why reform evaluations again? This is one of the, I think, pet peeves that emerges when we talk about things like the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We went from having 7 sustainable goals or 8 sustainable development goals with the Millennium Development Goals to having over 263 indicators, right? So are we moving towards indictatorship if we move towards adding the different types of things that we need to evaluate and track? And I would argue no in this regard, of course, in part because performance matters. Performance matters to operators, of course. Performance matters to politicians. Performance matters to households. And performance matters to financial investors. I'd like to echo Jaime's points earlier that none of this is going to happen without the inclusion and attention to what I call the financial architecture of improvements to water affordability, accessibility, and adequacy. So what we do know is that tracking spatial equity across indicators, such as water shutoffs, is feasible. Why is it feasible? Number one, we have the data already. We're simply not actually using the data that we have in a manner that allows us to make, again, reflecting on what Jaime said, to make that which is invisible visible to everyone. Right? So the first challenge in really addressing water poverty, not only in the United States, but across other countries. And in particular, I focus on cities because the sentiment has always been that rural areas are poorer and that's where water is not, and that is true. But within cities, we have a lot of inequality as well. But it is feasible to actually look at where that inequality exists. It's affordable to produce that analysis. It's helpful not only to the operators who are seeking to improve their performance, but also to advocates and to households who are seeking to advocate for themselves for improvements. But it also provides a more comprehensive picture of where water poverty is and who is it really challenging, who is it hitting most. And these are the types of things that matter if we do want to see change. So this is when I was asked to join this panel, in particular on technological and social innovations for water management, I know the assumption of my affiliation with MIT is that I will talk about technological innovations, but I think there are also low-hanging fruits like this, where we could actually use data we have, but in a more effective way to actually address water poverty before it hits. And I will stop there. So, thank you, gracias, obrigada.
Thank you, Carolina. Adriano, the floor is yours. Thank you,
Yes.
Gabriela Carolini. We changed your name. Did I change your name? I'm sorry. Carolina. Thank you, Gabriela Carolini. I'm sorry if I changed your name. Adriano, the floor is yours.
So, gracias. First, I'd like to apologize to speak in English. I'm not able to speak in Spanish, and I think my Portuguese is even worse than my English. So I have to deliver in English. Sorry about that. Luis know that. And I'd like also to first thank Luis and Gabriela for this invitation, for this opportunity, and also for organizing this fantastic event in such a short time. So many thanks for that. And I'd like to, before start, to make a connection. And was very good the saying from Professor Gabriela that inspired us a lot, and from Father Ferro at the beginning. I was having a talk with my 5-year-old daughter yesterday, and then she asked me, "Come on, Father, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm preparing a presentation to talk about water." And she said, "Come on, why don't you talk about Olaf at the Frozen 2 film, when the Olaf says, water has memory." So that's what my daughter was teaching me. And I think millennials are connected with this vision now. Millennials that will be in charge in 2025, they will be connected with social values, with sustainability, environmental values. And that's why also we as a society, as a company, should align our personal purpose with the professional purpose. So I'd like to start. Let me share my screen over here. I hope it's working. Is that working? Yeah. So the idea is to show some experience, but most important than that, learn from other experience over here. And but I'd like to share some technological innovations that we are doing over here in Sabesp, some social innovations projects, and some measures that we are doing during this pandemic time. So the first one that I'd like to show is a project related to the production of biomethane that came from the sludge. We are actually fueling more than 300 cars over here of our fleet with this fuel. That's kind of green fuel. The next one is the production of solar energy We are using our plants, our sewage plants, to produce solar energy in a way to also provide another kind of green energy inside our company. The next one is related also to energy, is the production of energy towards using the force that there is inside the water pipelines. So when the water flows into the pipelines, we use a generation and a turbine to create energy. And the next one is connect with customer experience. We launch an app and with electronic hydrometer and together with IoT system, where our customers, we are in a pilot at the moment, so there is at about 1,000 customers, can see the consumption in real time and can even close their taps remotely using the internet. So that's a way to engage customers, to make them take care about water questions, and also to monitor their consumption. Other issue I'd like to talk is, as a company, we have to be open to experience. And last year, we launched a pitch with the support from the BID, or International American Development Bank, to receive contributions from the society. There was a prize of almost $30,000 and a trip to South by Southwest to the winners. And one of the projects was connected with this Israeli company that brought to us a way of monitoring leakage in our system using satellite images. Well, moving on, I'd like to talk about the social projects. This first one is related, we call that Se Liga na Rede. And the idea is over here is for a water company getting inside the home. What I mean, normally companies only leave the pipelines from at the front door. And we realize that in some occasions, the low-income families don't have the money to even construct the infrastructure inside their homes. So the idea was to support these constructions, the pipes inside their homes, and even in some case, you finance the toilets for them. So these are the numbers over here that the professor said. It's important to have the numbers to measure always. So we have at about 92,000 households benefits with this program. The other one actually starts with a meeting in a Catholic church over here. You can see Don Odilo, Don Carlos over there. We talk how to provide water for irregular areas. I mean regular areas where people don't have the permission to stay there, but of course they need water, they are having water, and so we thought how to provide this kind of infrastructure in a place like that. So we construct a technology, a social technology of engagement, involving the community, involving the municipality, and we start that project fixing a contract with KPIs. So the idea is that with public-private partnership, we could arrange a contract where the contractor only receives when he delivers specific KPIs. So the idea is like that. Of course, there is a new way of the provider service. There is not the formal one, because in many places it's not possible to have the proper pipelines, but it's water with quality. And more important than that, in many cases, that's the only document that these people have, that this community have, to prove their identity, to prove their address. So it's more than water, it's to is a proof of address in many cases for those population. So this number also at about 100,000 water connection. And this is the amount of water we save, because connect with that, there is a question of water losses. The next project is our main project nowadays, is Pineros Rivers. As we can see here, of course, as Pope Francis taught us, we are all in the same boat. We are in a common home, and it's not possible to think clean that river without think to provide the correct sanitation to those areas over here. You can see rich areas and also slums. So it's necessary to get the connection, to get the sanitation to the whole area. So I'd like to share a video. I think it's gonna work. Let's try to play the video over here to show the situation.
Deseja que essa obra dessa canalização dos esgotos aí, que dure mais, né, nossas comunidades, dar mais qualidade de vida para as pessoas que moram aqui nas comunidades, né. Tem muita pessoa boa, sabe, muita pessoa com talento, e deixar, né, uma coisa boa, um legado, né, para os nossos filhos. Meu nome é Emerson, eu tenho 30 anos, fui nascido e criado aqui na comunidade de Jardim Ibirapuera, a favela da Irondina, e aqui onde eu passei a maior parte da minha vida. Essa aqui é a casa que eu morava com meus irmãos, minha família, minha mãe, meus pais. Tem muitas lembranças boas daqui. Eu sou técnico cinematográfico e nas minhas folgas, o que é possível, eu ainda ajudo, estou sempre tentando ajudar ela com a aporte social com a comunidade. A gente tenta ajudar de toda forma possível aqui os moradores. A gente se está precisando de cesta básica, a gente consegue. Está precisando de fralda para um filho, um leite, uma caixa de leite. Aqui, essa é a parte que a gente mais cuida. A parte de baixo, a gente cuida desse campo. A gente tenta sempre manter ele organizado, limpo. É o princípio, né? Acho que todos os órgãos aí que tem sua parte, mas a população é fundamental. Então ela tem que estar ali junto para não descartar esgoto em lugar inapropriado e tal. Essa parte toda que a Sabesp já fez o encanamento do esgoto. Espero que esse projeto do Rio Pinheiros realmente aconteça e estamos torcendo para dar certo. E quero vir um dia com meus filhos aqui e mostrar outro cenário, que é o atual do Rio Pinheiros. Um dia esse cenário aqui, o rio limpo, despoluído, pode ser um grande cenário para um filme que eu possa estar rodando futuramente.
Just to finish, of course, innovation in education is important. So we made various programs with scholars, with children. This one is a truck that we use to, it's like a cinema, 270-degree cinema, to show the water system, and then we go to the communities, to school to show that. And also some measures we've done with the COVID, donation of water tanks, water taps with free water in slums during the COVID-19 times. Also cleaning hospitals and public areas with water with chloride. And then donation from our volunteer group. That's also a really beautiful work from our employees using their free time to donate. It's all about love and compassion. That's a work of donation also in a community, indigenous community over here of water. And during the pandemic times, low-income families are exempt for paying water bills. That's a news from New York Times that shows this measure we are doing over here. And we only can do of that, take care of our employees. So we are taking care, asking them to use a mask, keep safe distance, and also making a survey to monitor psychological health during the home office work. So that's it. I take more than 10 minutes. Sorry about that. And gracias again.
Thank you, Adriano. Thank you, Gabriela. Now I'm going to take some of the questions and reflections we have in the Q&A. One of them is a question made by Gerardo Figueiredo from Sao Paulo. Good morning, everyone. Congratulations on your presentations. What do you think about partnerships, associations between governments and the private sector as a feasible solution to expand the supply and treatment of water in our society? And the second is addressed to the participation of citizens and communities, not only in decision taking, but also in water care. For many people, it seems that it's as simple as the fact that water comes from the tap, or you can buy milk in a market. I don't know who made this remark. He says, I consider we have to expand what is reduced to a rational use of water in the city with the hydrographic basins water problems. This makes me think about working permanently, understanding water as a resource and responsibility that we all have in its use, and in particular, perhaps in those sectors, due to their geographic location, economic condition, perhaps they don't have trouble accessing water. And we should think that this resource should be accessible, affordable to everyone. I'm going to start with Adriano. Perhaps the question was addressed to what you were commenting.
Yes. Yeah, I do believe that we have to maintain a public partnership, a public-private partnership. If you think about Sabesp, for example, we are a kind of public-private partnership because we are a state-owned entity with half of our shares belonging to the state government and the other part belonging to investors, either on New York stock exchange or São Paulo stock exchange. And that's good because we have to, it's possible to have a public view and also to have what professors say as fear and greed that the private sector brings. So in a good sense, of course. So it's a good movement of harmony, and it's good to be like that in a company, because I think better than in a contract, because it's also good to try to manage, try to eliminate the asymmetric information that sometimes occur when only you have a contract. So I think it's a good system, it's a good model, but it's important, this kind of public-private partnership, to be short. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, please. I am a little bit more nervous than Adriano about the idea with the private sector. Thank you, Gerardo Jr. Gracias.
very much of the moment. I think that there are many aspects of public-private partnerships that are important, but also many aspects of thinking through the negotiations, you as a lawyer know this very well, that are rather uneven, right? So information asymmetries will matter in producing the contract. The nature of the contract matters. In the case of Sabespi, you're talking about the ownership structure. Ownership structures matter, but there is also increasingly financial investors who are interested in investing in water utilities. And to go back to my own presentation on evaluations, that creates vulnerabilities. How does it create vulnerabilities? For example, in Brazil, my previous research, not in Sao Paulo, but in Brasilia, was examining precisely how these kinds of performance benchmarks might matter when financial investors are now present within a utility. And an operator there said to us, oh, well, we shut off the electricity because we were trying to achieve a certain benchmark in terms of energy costs for volume produced. Now, when the electricity is shut off, who's going to suffer? Which connections are being let down? I think there is a lot of nuance. It's a very difficult question. We know that we need partnerships. We know that we need it largely because of finance, but actually the research, the empirical research over history shows that while certain aspects have improved in terms of water efficiencies, we also know that when the private sector has been involved historically across Latin America, that water tariffs have risen. They've risen according to contracts, sometimes outside of contracts, as has happened in Argentina. There's a very storied history there that I won't get into. But it depends on how good everyone's lawyers is, I guess is my answer. So you need to be at the table, Gerardo.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah, I agree with you. This question is, that's why I think one good model is like a state-owned company with private shares, because as in our case, because the public keeps on charge of that, and you bring the efficient and the measures from the private. But there is a long discussion, debate about that. Yeah.
I will just say one comment to the question around the usage of water. I think we all agree with that, but if you actually look at who uses the most water, it is not households. We're not talking about poor people. We're talking about the agricultural sector. Chile is another good Latin American example. How much water does it take to produce avocados as opposed to getting to a household level connection? If you look at my own country, our daily consumption at a household is much, much higher than it should be, right? So again, these are important questions, but the nuances and how we frame them and how we answer them reveals a lot about equity.
Yeah, that's it.
Gracias, Gabriela. Gracias, Adriano. Yo voy a
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Adriano. I'm going to take the last question because I think it's interesting to round off this panel, and it's one that is asked recurrently in different fora. So that will allow us to reflect upon the answers together. The other question, don't you think we have to make a distinction between privatizing our ownership of water and the management of public water and sewages? Gabriela and Ariano, you have the floor, of course, and the other guests, attendees are invited to participate.
It is very important to differentiate between those aspects. I think other sectors teach us lessons. So for example, if you look at the UK, I believe we have a colleague from the UK here. There was a differentiation in the transport sector about who owns the railroads and who owns the trains, who's managing that. All of those things matter. If we're talking about the ownership of the actual natural resource, yes, that could be very problematic, and we see that play out in the United States, again, to use my own country, where in the west of the country, there are huge battles where people are buying lands simply for the water rights, not for the land. The value is in the water and the access to the water. And that is a problematic private sector market, right? Because then we're controlling the future sustainability of water for many, many, many people, right? So I agree with you entirely. I think we do need to differentiate between the ownership of management and the ownership of the resource, and so on in the services. Adriano, I will let speak.
Yeah, and that's also, I think, is the same model over here in Brazil. The ownership is public. The water ownership is what we call titularidade over here. Titularidade, ownership of water, and but I also believe that, as I said before, in many occasions, it's good to bring the private sector thinking about the model we've done with Pitch to bring new technological ideas from startups. So that's a good way also to open our minds to new ideas, to new solutions. For example, there is we all know that all sectors are passing through a disruption now. If you look to sanitation, I do recommend the first episode of a Netflix series called Gates Code, named Gates Code. The first episode is all about innovations in sanitation. And so I think that's a good way to bring these ideas with the private, but always having the ownership of the water to the public as a main question. So concessions, but with the ownership belonging to the public. I don't know if I made it clear. I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Sí, sí, sí. Muchas gracias. Y vamos a...
Yes, thank you very much. And now we're going to close this panel. Diego, we close the Q&A of this panel with Diego, and then Luis will be opening the next panel. I want to make a clarification. It has to do with the topics that are being raised right now. I come from Israel, even though I was born in Argentina, and Ariano is from Rio de Janeiro. So he will forgive me that I'm Argentine. When these questions about the private and public areas in Israel, it is quite clear that the resource management is public. It's not private. We don't have that like in the United States or a right to water. It is basically a public resource, but that doesn't mean that sanitation plants are private, because you have the VOT modality. So we need funding to have this type of water. But these sanitation plants sell the water to distribution network based on a clearly stated contract, how much we are going to produce daily. It's not privatization of the resource. The water management has to be public. What we are privatizing, we are using the BOT for the service. So if the service provider can use more efficient technologies and reduce the energy consumption and loss of money, that's okay. I want to have water according to the contract, with the quality and efficiency that they should provide us with. That's why amidst the Latin American discussions, we discuss this issue. Are we selling to the sovereignties, and are we selling it to the companies that produce desalinized water? And I think we have to make a distinction. Management has to be centralized, has to be strong, so that they can say what they have to do. The same applies to effluence treatment. For the service, it can be privatized, but it has to be clearly defined by the centrally. Gabriela? Luis, your microphone is mute. Okay, yes, we silence our microphones and then we turn them on. 10 years ago, on July 28th, the United Nations Act was passed, and that raises the universalization of the human rights to water, and very important to understand the declaration, to understand the impact of successive public policies in this issue. There have been lots of actions. Many of you have been involved in these initiatives. We're talking about public policies. It is interesting to have a discussion, a public-private discussion, but I would like to add, before moving to Diego again, Jose Luis Gil made a remark regarding the rethinking of the rational use of water and understanding it as a responsible use of water. Diego Berger and Jaime Gutierrez Bajo, and Diego from Mecarot. And with Jaime, we have been working on the management proposal, international program, and new paradigms for the regulation of water and sanitation services. We give the floor to Diego Berger, and then the floor will be Jaime's. Okay. We would say you started talking before, Diego, ahead of time. I love these kind of discussions. I always talk about hydropolicy and hydrophilosophy. This is what we are talking about. It has to do with hydrophilosophy. I'm going to show you or share my presentation. I have been working here for 31 years. I did a PhD in the administration of hydric resources in Technion University, but my expertise in my work abroad. I coordinate international projects. We're working in Latin America, in India, and in Africa, in Central America. And one of the things that I have found is that they always want to have technology transfers. And this is what I mentioned last year when I met Luis in Buenos Aires. And this comes from Latin America, who want technology transfer. They don't know why they want them, but they want them. So I wonder, why do you want technology? What has technology provided us with over the last years? The same things we are doing for water distribution, or were done 50, 60 years ago, are being done now. Technology is just helping us be more efficient, and the costs are reduced. But there isn't a water problem that cannot be troubleshot with technologies. The water technology is logotech. Just like water was being supplied 50 years ago, it can be done, but we can have a more efficient use. That's why it was good to hear Alfredo Ferro from the Secretariat of University Policies. This is one of the latest reports which shows the water supply. You can see that most reports don't mention the gap or mention new technologies for water supply. Here they're saying how much money is needed. Here they're saying that for rural drinking water, to have it as an annual requirement, they need this amount, and this is the 10th part. And here we can see how many people don't have access to drinking water, almost 25%, and how many people do not have access to basic sanitation. I am very ashamed of this, that the world has come to this situation, but it doesn't have anything to do with technology. This has to do with public policies, as Luis said before, saying that the solution to all these problems lies in technology is a problem and it's a lie. Technology has turned into a medium. It has turned into an objective. People are after technology and they don't know what they want. This is a major problem I find not only in Latin America. They want technology, but they don't know what they want it for. They have to define what problem they have to solve, and based on that, they have to see what technology they need. That's why over the last decades, we have conviction policies, as Gabriela Carolini mentioned before. The convincing policies, we try to convince people. Most water is being used by agricultural farmers, and we also have technologies pilot policies that have been tested and validated in other places. But we still have to persuade, to convince the farmer so that he uses less water. And we also have free of charge supply and subsidies. We are launching a master plan in the northern part of the India, and there are free of charge drip trickling irrigation. Non-governmental organizations are supplying farmers for free, but this is a difficult situation because they're trying to persuade people that do not want to be persuaded. People who want technology, and this I have seen in many parts of the world, farmers that need technologies and that value water and what is being produced are desalinizing water and using all technologies. It's not necessary to talk to them and give them a boost. They are going to use it, but how can we do this at a larger scale for people who are not convinced that this has to be efficient? So the necessity and the incentive. Everybody says we need water, but we are talking about a financial society where people see that if they use a new technology, they're going to reduce their water consumption and going to spend less, so the situation will be different. For consumption agricola consumption, as was mentioned before, is paid. Is absolutely free. Agricultural consumption is free. So how can we ask them to be more efficient in resources that they are not valuing? Based on my experience, what are the 4 building blocks? We're talking about public policies, and this is what has been done in Israel. The 4 building blocks we need to have a sustainable irrigation sector are: first, we have to measure the resource, which is not done in all parts of the world. And the first Water Act passed in 1955 stated that we had to measure water for agricultural and other purposes. As I said, even in Central America or in India, water is estimated. The amount of money that is being spent to make estimations about agricultural agricultural consumption, rather than using an advanced technology that is a water measure or meter. Someone has had to come and see and measure it, but that doesn't exist in the world. The water consumption is estimated based on the crops they have. How can people include new technologies or try to be efficient based on this policy? As we said before, there should be an act that says that water has to be regulated by the state and is a public good and not a private good. That is basic. And we have to have a centralized management. We cannot have a large number of ministries and organizations within that, because each one is going to defend its own position. So the management has to be mainstream. And something that is important, people sometimes are ashamed of, funding. In Israel, 20 years ago, it was decided that the sector is self-funded and closed. So we don't have state funding. Who pays for the water? That's another issue. But the water price is management tool, and if people don't know how much they are measuring and consuming and how efficient, how much efficiency they have when they spend less water, we don't provide them with any incentive so they are more efficient. So Israel funding in Israel is through a closed cycle because management is a reflection of education, and that shows the value that people give to water. Israel was founded based on the scarcity of water culture, unlike Latin America where there is abundant water. So how can I explain to someone who had a lot of water and saw the abundance of water in rivers like the Rio La Plata, that they have to pay for water? How can we explain that to someone? That is a difficult public perception. In Israel, the water price is uniform. So all costs are divided by the amount of water supplied. So when we decided to do that, the financial sector understood that it had to be separated, to separate it from politics. We had to allow professionals to say how to supply water to everyone. There is always an emergency problem that can involve water budgets to be used for another purpose. That's why, as I said at the beginning, we use a very tight project for water. Within those budgets, we have the development of future projects, so we don't need a budget to build new infrastructures. And I'm talking about water for agriculture and household consumption, all types of water. So when we talk about technologies and to have a structure of that type allows us to place in the market, because these new technologies are not paid by the last consumer. They are paid by all consumers. We can also use more expensive heat resources, water resources, because we can use desalination water that costs $0.50 per cubic meter, but in the past it was more expensive. So we have to be more efficient in terms of technology. And we can also have cheaper money. And sometimes people are afraid of talking about money and how much you have to pay to have a sustainable water resource. And I think that the most interested in the water price and water bill is the water consumer. I think that has to be very clear. Once again, when I talk about the water resource, I'm talking about everything, agricultural and household sector. The agricultural resource in Israel pays for water, so they have to be more efficient when using water. We should not, or we don't have to tell them what they have to produce with the water we are giving them. We don't have to tell them what crops they have to harvest. And sometimes they reuse the effluents, and the treated effluents are cheaper than drinking water we provided them with before. It's not only cheaper, but we also give them nutrients so that they can use fertilizers for crops. This is a way to boost or encourage farmers to use another kind of infrastructure. We have to put an end to the illusion of having instant magical solutions. We have to manage what they want to do with water resources, and they will be new technologies will be naturally included. Thank you very much. I was brief. I tried to be as brief as possible, but I could be talking for 3 hours on and on. This we are doing in the next month's course. You will have time to develop this topic. The idea is to work on the issue. Among the attendees, we have Mariano Duhovne, who is writing down these suggestions. Jaime Gutierrez Basho, you're there. Hello, how are you? The floor is yours. I'll try to be as brief as Diego. I want to thank Luis, Gabriela, and all the organization for having me in this online forum. It seems to me that I am the fisherman that is going to pick up on some views and reflections mentioned in the discussion. I'm going to share a brief presentation of mine.
¿Se ve? Sí, ¿no? Bien. Como decía que he tomado algunas notas de ideas que han ido saliendo.
I have taken down notes based on the ideas that cropped up during the seminar. One of the first conclusions that I come to, based on what I have heard, is that, as I imagined, innovation is not the same as technology. The human being is at the core. The management systems based on human beings' knowledge can be a feasible alternative. So, as I have to be brief, I wanted to work on 3 settings for innovation in water management. On the one hand, we have the citizens' involvement. It has different angles, and that has to do with co-responsibility, water management. Water and water management involves us all, users at the core. I think that creativity is also involved, and information. Now I'm going to break down each one of these 3 issues. Jose Luis Gil, a master and friend of mine, has been referring to these issues. He talked about the water notion as from a basin point of view. I think that is another innovation point. And even though if it's not innovation, we should do it. And technology plays a role. But it's always intended to enhance people's quality of life. The first of the issues, the citizens' involvement, has to do with many settings, but there are 2 major settings. On the one hand, we have information. Information is the foundation of any management system that involves citizens and users. I currently work in initiatives where technologists and scientists have a challenge to face. They realize that the systems they use miss the social factor, and they have assessed, I don't know if numerical, but they have realized that this is an essential component of this formula. So my task is to connect scientific managers with society and to create channels in both senses. I think that is vital. As regards citizens' involvement, which is one of my areas of expertise, we draw a pyramid where at the basis we have the information. We have to have not too much, but good, accessible information that can reach out to many people. And then we have the public queries, and then shared decision taking, where we have a more narrow area. And we have creativity. Many times we think about solutions to problems that certain populations have, and we're thinking about the technical cabinet. We have a board of experts, and the ideas don't work, and we wonder why. But if we had asked ourselves at the beginning why, we would have come up with certain differences. And the third innovation setting is a comprehensive notion of the water cycle, which is adequately reflected in European and state regulations and in many territories. Here I can distinguish three key issues of the comprehensive water cycle. We have the urban water comprehensive cycle that is increasingly gaining importance, but it's not taken away. We have runoff water, runoff or rainwater. They're still seen as a problem, but it can be stored in storm tanks, but then we have to treat it as if it were polluted. In that sense, there are many formula being used for permeable roads, and that helps to an in-depth use of this urban water. So we can have this idea of a cycle, an urban water involving recycling. And then we have a basin scale comprehensive management. I have just started a project with a colleague of mine for a pilot project of basin comprehensive management. It's an involvement process. And what we are doing now is to send queries to 150 key agents that had not expressed themselves before, so they can convey their perceptions, their proposals, and what their worries are about a basin. That's why we are setting aside the idea involving that water is only a river or it's only the tap, the water that comes from the tap. Here in Spain, we have had floods, and for years we thought that we had to come up with solutions on site. Unfortunately, we are opening up our minds, and we have realized that floods, downstream floods, could be solved with upstream waters based on nature, or with green and blue and gray infrastructures. And as regards ecosystemic services, we have upwards waters, upstream waters. We have to consider the aging and the loss of economic activities. The payment for service
más densas y más cuantiosas que están cerca de la costa aguas abajo. Y por último, lo que ya tiene que ver con la tecnología, para, como decía, poniendo el foco en la calidad de vida de las personas, hay tres ámbitos en los que creo que la tecnología, y aquí también recojo algunas de las intervenciones anteriores, por un lado el tema de monitorizar el dejo de compartir la pantalla. Acuerdo sobre
hidrofilosofía que me parece muy interesante. Tengo una
Jaime, since we started this initiative in Israel in 2005 with a closed financial sector, I said that desalinizing was not possible with more than 50% of losses in the network. Losses now are below the 10%. Over these 50 years, as the water resource has money to lower the losses, it has been inverted because they cannot invest in some other places. As there has been a reduction in losses. That's why we pay the water bill that is lower than what we paid some years ago. So this is efficiency. The thing is how we can regulate it so that the ones that provide a private service do know what they want. So we have to have very clear and defined structures. Jaime, you also refer to basins. The problem with basins is that we have to define the underground water. Underground basin water is different from surface water. So we have basins that comprise more than one region, and here in Israel there are more than one. There is more than one country involved, and there are neighboring countries with which we can work. So we have to take into account what we have to do. Well, this is the reputation we have, right? This is what Luis always says. Thank you, Diego. It's good to listen to you, and it's always very interesting. Thank you, Diego, for being with us in this forum. I would like to apologize to you because there were some problems with technical problems with the translation. So we are very sorry because we could not provide you with translation during a couple of minutes. Now we're going to start with the fourth panel. We will hear from Christian Taylor, president of IDIS in Argentina, and then Hector Garcia from the beautiful Delft city in the Netherlands. Well, good morning, everyone. Bye-bye, Gabriela, who's leaving. My name is Christian Taylor. I'm the president of IDIS Argentina. I would like to thank you for having me here. Thank you, Luis and Gabriela. These exchanges are very important in these pandemic times. It's very important to be able to share experiences among each other. I'm going to share my presentation with you. Can you see it? Yes. In Argentina, as you know, we have been working on underground rivers for many years. One of them was my grandfather, who was working in the workshops. And we have new technologies. We are working with new technologies and developing infrastructure works. And we have a complex environmental problem with extreme adverse events, as we can see every day in the media. In the planet, the demographic growth for the next 30 years is more than 2 million inhabitants. And we have talked about the major urban centers, and most of the population is going to be in the major urban centers. More than 50%. In Argentina, is even more. It's more than 40%. And the urban centers are the ones that consume the largest number of energy. There are a lot of greenhouses effects. This is what we have to do in metropolitan management, for example. So we can work a lot. On the other hand, we have the planet water demand. Globally speaking, not only for the water consumption, it will rise 50%, and water stress because of the climate change is going to affect a greater population. And on the other one, while we see these things happening, we have water distribution systems that have losses of 40 to 50% in Latin America, for example. So we still have a lot to do. So these are some forecasts for the population growth, where most of the population would be conglomerated in large cities. And we'll see how, as from the pandemic, there will be some change of habits that will change the distribution of urban and urban population. We have a big gap to extend water services. More than 1 million people do not have access to safe water. 4.5 million people do not have access to sanitation services, and more than 900 million people have an open defecation system. And we have a debt with these people, with all the people. In Argentina, in round numbers, we have roughly 7 million people who do not have access to drinking water, and 20 million people do not have sewages. So even it has been planned already, the pandemic has put on the agenda the fact that we have to have water and sanitation service, and we have to prioritize sanitation. This is a 6th SDG. So in that sense, in the forum, we talked about vulnerable neighborhoods. I have seen the experience in Sabes. At a local level, ISA is doing its job. So we want to reach out to most vulnerable neighborhoods, to which is not easy because they have an irregular distribution of plot of lands. Accesses are more difficult to execute works and to operate them. And sometimes we can have cooperative associations. This is a topic that we have to develop. There are many millions of inhabitants living under this condition, and it's the greatest risk and most vulnerable population. And regarding the water cycle and the processes we perform, we have water losses in all the water treatment of effluents. We also have a large number of wastes, and we want to turn them into resources, and we want to apply the 5R, meaning reducing not only water losses, but also want to reduce sludge volumes and waste, and reuse, retrieve, recycle, reuse nutrients, recovering or restoring the sources. As I told you before, for this projection of inhabitants, even if we have some countries such as Korea, where in South Korea the population reached a peak and it's going to go down in the coming years, in some countries like in Argentina, in the metropolitan area, we still have an important demographic growth, and we also have the coverage gap. So the future water demand is very important. And that is the incentive, as Diego mentioned before, is the necessity to make the system more efficient to supply to suit the demand. So it's important to work on efficiency. And there we use technology, but conceptually speaking, there are some countries that have renewed their distribution networks, and their losses have been reduced from 50 to 5%. So have to renew networks. We have to control and measure, as was stated today. We have to measure everything. And we have to be able to start lifting station speed variator drives, as it's been doing in Buenos Aires, so that at night time we don't have rises in pressure and we deliver more water than the one that is necessary for consumption. Otherwise, this turns into losses. We have to have a more efficient system. We also have to have smart meters, as I said before, that people know how much they are consuming. It's important that they are aware of what they are consuming. With all these measures, not only we can lower the demand, but also the energy consumption. If we apply the circular economy notion, it has to do with reusing, retrieving, generating energy. In Argentina, we have roughly 400,000 water treatment plants, and we still have a lot to do. So we still have to make use of this potential advantage and the amount of sludges we have in the plants and the energy use, the use of energy. We have the opportunity of doing many things in these installations. In these installations and in the future. We have to transform water treatment plants into resource recovery plants. And we also have to talk about the comprehensive management of water. We have to have more resilient infrastructures. We have talked about desalination. In Chile, they are discussing whether to use or reuse the water. We have to use new alternative sources in the underground rivers, wetlands, glaciers, and of course the public policies, both in what has to do with vulnerable neighborhoods where special regulations are necessary, but also what has to do with the reuse of energy. And we also need regulations to use all that. And I support the fact that we have to manage basins. We have to have a strong basins agents that independently of the political management, we have to have strong basins agencies that have a sustainable policy over time. The water and environment issues are long-term considerations. And the same applies to metropolitan areas. We have the idea of having metropolitan areas, taking into account that in metropolitan areas, we can do the most to be efficient in all resources, not only water. We have to create these agencies to be more efficient at a metropolitan level. So these are just images of osmosis and desalination plants. And my colleague from Mekorot probably knows this plant. There are new sources, and we can think about transferring circuits to transport raw water to be more resilient. We have examples everywhere. I have selected some. Many things have been invented and we have to apply them more. For example, the Amsterdam plans like WaterNet. We have people from the Netherlands here in the seminar. In Denmark, in Copenhagen, have the Chilean biofactories. All these plants use the resources more, and they have fertilizers for irrigation purposes. And we also generate energy, such as like heat, and want to be more efficient in the use of resources so that these plants are resource generators. And we have some examples. In intelligent resources, we have an image or a picture of Seoul. They have built a highway where there is a stream that creates a conservation criterion for the environment. Aesthetically, it looks very nice, and the use of water is very efficient. And we are working in the smart management of water by applying different reuse techniques. We also talked about rainwater. It's important to moderate the rain peaks, to store those volume of rainwater and to retrieve them and to reuse them and to conduct treatments. Smart treatment plants, the use of thermal gradients, the difference between the water temperature and the room temperature, many things that we can create, and it would be great to develop these initiatives. Even if there are some underway, it would be good to develop pilot works and to apply pilot technologies to replicate them in Argentina with all the comprehensive management, such as when we have early warning system with raw water, streams, filtering, smart treatment plants, the rainwater management treatment plants, the use of treated water for the cleaning of public roads and to supply these streams, and also for irrigation purposes. We have been working extensively these years on the epidemiological control of effluents. My colleague from Delft will surely be able to talk about that. Smart public restrooms have been designed, and they can monitor the epidemiological state of the community. So these are all initiatives and developments with water as an axis, create this smart, comprehensive management to be more efficient so that more people have access to water. If we use water more efficiently, we will distribute it among more people. Logically speaking, this efficient use of water goes hand in hand with the efficient use of energy and the use of sludges, the thermal differences, and they are not self-sustainable in terms of energy. So that's Argentina. We have a team, and we work in initiatives to have exchanges like this forum, and we want to have exchanges with environment, sanitation, waste, climate change teams. We also want to deal with the most vulnerable areas. And we have developed several online technical activities and trainings, because what this pandemic has allowed us to do is to more rapidly connect with one another. Before, we had to travel a long distance to meet in a seminar or in a congress, and now we are all connected, we are technically exchanging information. So I think that is a positive part of this pandemic, that we are able to exchange technical information among each other. And today, at the beginning of this forum, we talked about the right of all citizens to education and studies. The citizens' right to education and studies. This is the Stockholm Junior Water Prize. In Argentina, we select students, so they take part in this Nobel Junior Water Prize in Stockholm, and all countries participate. In Argentina, we select students, and this is an incentive so that young people address the issue of water and study. Well, I invite you all to the Inter-American Congress to be held in April on a semi-online basis in April in Buenos Aires, 2021. Well, that was my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Christian. Now we'll hear from Hector Garcia from the Delft in Netherlands. The microphone is yours. Good morning, good afternoon, Gabriela and Luis, for having me here to participate in this event. I want to congratulate you all for organizing this fora and to have such interesting panels that include several countries. This is an international forum, so congratulations to both. And thank you for having me here and my institute to participate in this forum. My talk will be in Spanish Uruguayan. I hope you can understand me. I have prepared a presentation. I'm going to show you an example of a technological and social innovation, if I manage to share the screen. Can you see the slide? Yes, the screen. Yes, we can see it well. Okay. The idea was to present an innovation, and coincidentally here in the Netherlands, we have developed an initiative. I don't know if it was the first country, it was one of the first ones, which in February, due to the pandemic, started to monitor the wastewater to determine the traces, the genetic parts of the virus. And it has been very successful. And the news was disseminated in several media around the world. So along with them and IHE Delft, the institute I belong to, we have come up with a team proposal aimed at the world, where there isn't full infrastructure covered by collection systems. What is this initiative about? We started in Amersfoort. They started to detect the presence of genetic materials before detecting infections in people. As you can see in this picture, the orange line shows the concentration and the copies of the gene, a specific biomarker, and the blue dots show the number of people with a positive COVID test, and the yellowish color, you can see the number of hospitalizations. So the idea was to correlate or establish trends among the virus concentration in wastewater and the number of people hospitalized or infected, with limits of detections which were very low. When there is between 1 and 10 infections in 100,000 inhabitants, the system can detect the gene in wastewater. This KWR Institute started to detect, do studies in cities. Here we have 6 cities: La Haya, Tilburg, and Rotterdam. And we could establish a pattern and a correlation between the concentration and the presence of genetic material in wastewater and the number of people hospitalized. Once this model is adjusted and validated, it's very useful to forecast trends, and this is what's happening now. There is a second wave in these latitudes, and we were able to predict in what cities we had concentrations of the virus. Is this a unique initiative in the Netherlands? No. The wastewater monitoring is being done all over the world. Brazilian colleagues are doing it as well. They are doing it in Belo Horizonte and Rio de Janeiro. In Argentina, ISA has had some initiatives as well. In the United States too, and in Australia. Detecting COVID-19 in wastewater is knowledge that is available for any microbiological laboratory. What is a bit unique in the Netherlands is that the government is considering it like one more public health indicator, such as the number of infected people, the number of people hospitalized. So as of April the 1st, there were only 29 points of wastewater monitored, and the Minister of Public Health on July the 1st requested the Public Health Institute in the Netherlands to conduct a more comprehensive monitoring, and as of July the 1st, 79 wastewater points were monitored, and that included 10 million inhabitants. The Netherlands have roughly 17 million inhabitants, and as of September the 1st, 352 points will be included. So all the Netherlands will be monitored. As I told you before, what matters is that the Public Health Institute adopted this measure to monitor wastewater as one further indicator to assess the circulation of the virus. So here we can see that the number of positive tests are reported, the hospital admissions per day, intensive care admissions per day. And as we can see as well, we can see the concentration of the virus in wastewater. And we have a weekly update of these parameters. And as you can see on the right of this slide, at the bottom, we have the last 2 weeks where you can see a peak that is rising. You can see it in orange, and it shows the outcomes achieved lately. So this is an innovation that happened as a result of the pandemic. But as in our institute, we see that it's incomplete, because this innovation depends on some parameters. What happens in those districts where there are no collection systems, or the cities that are partially covered? So there is, we decided to work with KWR, and we propose a system that includes those communities that do not have a sanitation coverage. So the concept is very similar, but we also included in this early warning system the monitoring of those residential areas, peri-urban areas, formal and informal settlements that do not have access to sanitation. So we included tanks, atmospheric tanks, and the discharge of this septic sludge or fecal sludge. Something else that I wanted to tell you or show you in this slide is that this is the first notion to have a more comprehensive early warning system. Additionally, in our institute, we are working with the inclusion of intelligence in the toilets. We started working with this in 2011 after an emergency, after an earthquake or hurricane. Sanitation devices are toilets, but we don't know how many users daily use these pits, how quickly these tanks are filled up. So we started to build a prototype of a smart toilet. We use a lot of sensors, and this toilet can detect how much time or the weight of that person separates the urine and sludge separation, feces separation. So if the tank is full, we close the toilet, we close the tank, and we stop people from using the toilets so that we can avoid an overflow of pathogens. So this notion we started using in 2011, and we assessed the first toilet in 2017 in the city of Tacloban. In the refugees camp due to a typhoon that was very strong in 2015. From the feedback we got, we have improved and we have come up with a second version of these smart toilets. They have a sexier kind of design, if you like it. We have included a basin for hand washing, solar panels, rainwater collection systems, a panic button. Above all, when women use the toilet at night in refugee camps, many assaults or aggressions occur. So we have learned from the previous toilet. And something that has remained pending is what happens if we include sensor in these toilets and when we can detect symptoms of people who have a disease. So this portable toilet allows having an early warning system of a circulation of certain diseases. At the time we designed this toilet, the COVID-19 pandemic did not exist. So we focus more on conventional diseases such as malaria, cholera, typhoid fever, hepatitis. Now we have included the possibility of detecting COVID-19. Even if there isn't a saliva direct detector, we can use it for science, keeps on making progress, and in short, we'll be able to detect the virus in saliva more directly and faster. But this notion has also been included in the general scheme I showed you before. In this monitored early warning system, we have these smart toilets that are connected online, and they can indicate the circulation of the virus in these formal or informal settlement settings. This is also under research, And it's not a product that is being sold, it's not being developed, but it's a concept that we have developed and we have proved. We have made advancements in this notion. We have a number of sensors to detect symptoms, and these symptoms can be detected in a community and also in a household toilet that is connected to the sanitation system. We can be provided with the same information about symptoms and diseases. This is the latest that we are adding to this concept. And regarding COVID-19, there are clues that traces of the virus are left in the feces, and it is questioned whether the virus can be transferred from a fecal towel or from person to person. But in the case we want to make it sure, where there isn't a collection system, we have been working with decentralized system for sludge treatment that can inactivate viruses. We have played with other viruses and bacteria. So not only is effective the removal of pathogens, but the system turns a septic sludge, and if we refer to circular economy, as our colleague mentioned before, we turn the septic sludge into solid material with a heating, with a heating power being equal or greater to that of carbon. It can be used for microfiltration, and thus we have a higher quality of water. This was the presentation that I wanted to make. So innovation, social and technological innovations, these are technologies that we are developing in the Institute. And I also wanted to talk about COVID-19, because even if it is a recent issue, we could adjust some of our innovations to suit and address this issue. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hector. Now we will move to the Q&A section. Jose Luis, who has been in previous fora, and I want to make some comments about Hector's work and in informal economy areas and a way to retrieve the social space. This makes me think, and that's why I opened the Q&A. If you have you analyzed that there are cases in which these technological innovations have a greater impact? Because we can see that you have worked on different applications. Have you estimated where there can be a greater impact? And have you analyzed other cases where there are more restrictions to use them? Hector? Yes, the greatest impact we see at the Institute, and that's why we have created a master's course in suburban sanitation, because many times, and the graphics that were presented before, I think Diego talked about the lack of coverage of sanitation in the United Nations, and what is considered by sanitation is very basic. If we have a pit, that is sanitation. It's not a toilet like the one we have at home. There is a number of inhabitants in this planet that do not have access to sanitation. So we want to provide these people with effluent treatment plants, as we have in the Netherlands. So it would be impossible to reach out to 100% people or to have a full coverage. So we try to promote existing technology. That's why I like Diego's presentation. Technology is there. We have to make it suitable to those places where it's not available. So in those areas where there is no access to sanitation, we have the greatest applicability of this technology. Here in the Netherlands, we are not doing pilot testing. We are doing them in the Philippines, and we see the greatest impact they can have. And the second question, Gabriela, what was the second question? No, I think that was the only question. Thank you. Christian, would like to go deeper into the question you mentioned, which is about a topic we have been addressing and talking in this forum, the interaction between access to financial resources and the solutions, the necessary solutions. How have you been analyzing the notion of circular economy in water and sanitation issues, the greater access to water and sanitation services? I will answer one of these issues, and then there is another question about another topic. So I want to answer both. As regards the regulating valves, in all the distribution systems, we have regulation valves. So sometimes there are topographic changes, so there are sectors where there is more pressure than in others. Sometimes there is more pressure at the outlet when there is a loss of charge. So we have to regulate it on the road so we have a reasonable precision of those valves. Rural valves, it says that they are not efficient. As Diego is here, I was offered when I was in Israel. Well, no, I was not offered. There was a company that offered the regulation valve technology in Hi-Fi. They delivered water with regulation valve, and the installation of regulation valve. With that, you return the investment. The district bought the water. So only with the water consumption saving, you pay the investment. His connection was cut off. The regulated systems are more efficient, so there are more losses. As regards this potential, we have to, in Argentina, to achieve a universal coverage, we are talking about $40 million, $40,000 million. And we have to be more efficient. If we are more efficient, and we think about the right of use of water, if we are more efficient, we will have an additional supply to give water to the ones that do not have access to water. So you will be saving in new infrastructures. Each water treatment plant is an enormous investment. So we have a lot to do to be more efficient. We are working on that. There is a lot of work to do. And as regards the use of ledges, plants with digesters are being installed. It's a complex issue. Sometimes we have incinerators. Digesters are being installed, and there are some projects for their installations and to generate energy. And the idea is to have them connected to the national interconnection system and to have a strong energy source, such as we have the wind energy and solar energy. We should be able to generate energy from sludge. And to make progress on the sewage systems in such a way that the investment is going to be more efficient. The investment is good for the health, and it's also good for energy resources. Okay, thank you, Christian. With that example that Diego gave, well, we are going to start charging for the use of water. No, with Diego, we remember. Now you say that you are my representative. No, but Gabriela should be my representative, not you. No, so you are not going to collect any fees. What Christian said is very interesting. During this year, we have been working from the Institute and the Foundation of Sanitary Workers in an initiative for the training with IHE Delft, and would like to have a transfer initiative for the accessibility of resources and for the improvement of those resources. Now we will move to the next panel. Next panel we have Elena Cristofori from Italy and Patrick Thompson, who is in Oxford, right? You are in Oxford, right, Patrick? Yes. Elena, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. This is a very interesting event. I'm going to show you what we do in my social company. My company is called TRIM, Translated into Meaning. It has been operating since 2016. And our mission is to give support to citizens and communities to come up with innovative technologies to reduce disasters. And we create community observatory networks for the impact on health and environment. We primarily work with communities working in vulnerable areas, and they are subject to climate change. And they have extreme events such as floods, droughts, and phenomena like that. The climate change has disrupted the meteorological patterns and has affected many sectors, food security and health, and the availability of water, of course. So, as we heard in the other talks, we have to train communities and players in the measurement and gathering of information and to share the data that is measured about climate and water. All this is key to improve decision making. So we have to understand what has been analyzed before, having graphs, data in the presentation. So what we attempt to do is to develop technologies and to have people be closer to the experiences. We have heard that the river culture, the Amazon culture is important. So science is not only figures. We have to include these factors too. And it's important for outcomes to reach out to communities and that indicators are built together with the communities and that users are involved in the measurement of this data. Our approach, so we are a technological company, but not only do we deal with technological issues. We have 4 building blocks. The first one is optimizing the knowledge of risk through the different actions. We have to involve heterogeneous actors, different actors, good practices and knowledge of risk. I have said that we work in Italy, but we also work in Africa. And between technology and science, there might be differences. So the second issue to improve the knowledge of risk is to integrate science with native Indians' knowledge. We have to promote initiatives that are not only interesting for the science, they should be adequate to the context where we are working. And they should be capable of systematically making measurements, which is a bit difficult. And what we do to improve the knowledge of risk is to create a community observatories capable of timely detecting risk signals and identify effective signals. Risk signals are not only the ones we infer from figures, but also from local observations. For example, in a river, in a well, the water level of quality indicators might be very important, but then if we say that to someone who lives in another world that is isolated from the data, for them, it might be easier to say, well, the water color and that's it. I'm going to talk about monitoring. It's very important to do monitoring. We use available existing technologies or adapt it to our company setting. This is to ease the monitoring and recording of relevant data in these communities at the local scale. Traditional methods for data collection, such as paper, with technology and mobile applications, we can favor the participation of the community members that can find it difficult to use technology. But we also want to store data efficiently. We have a Prima device that has been developed in our company with Vero Olympica, and it has been adapted to data collection and also in areas where there is not an internet connection. When we have internet, all the area measured can be shared with the users or by the users. We also use a third building block, and that is viewing and analyzing data. Viewing and analysis of data suited to the context is very important. It has to be made available. One of the major problems we have that we ask people to make measurements, but then outcomes are not returned to the users. So decisions are made, and we use dialogue platforms, not dialogue involving words, but also web interactive platforms that can be stimulus for data collection, to analyze the data, and gradually to conduct this process and try to speak the same language between scientists and communities. These platforms can be integrated with satellite data, so the platform has different levels of information and distribution of data, depending on the user identifier. And now we have a system to share and report our data, along with the users that develop those instruments, so as to disseminate meaningful information suited to the different players. We use a Telegram chat, and we have a chat box system. So based on the databases, we can create messages that can be shared with the users. Warning messages, early warning messages. It can be taken from the database and be shared. These data are validated with users and adapted to the user's comprehension, understanding. All that we do is focus on the Sendai framework for the reduction of disaster prevention 2015-2030, where #1 priority is to understand the disaster's risk at a local and national level. So we boost the collection of and analysis of data and guarantee their dissemination by taking into account the different needs involved, and to update and disseminate this information, to use adequate formats, and to adequately seize the traditional practice and knowledge from local populations and native Indian populations to complement scientific knowledge. All this is paramount. And to round off my talk, I want to say that with technology, there is a lot of data available. It is quite easy to set up platforms that can analyze data, view information, for example, make predictions, monitor the use of water or the quality of water, because the difficulty doesn't lie in collecting data or storing them or processing them and achieving outcomes. Currently, the technology can do this very well. The difficulty lies in the quality of data on the one hand, and the use of this data by the community. What we have seen at a technical advanced level, this might be very useful. But if we talk about communities without a technical training, if we want to suggest solutions without trying to tell them where we get this information from, it's very complicated. We work in Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe and Niger. And we have risk reduction initiatives, and we have One Health project that considers the human and public health as a whole. What we do is this community technology and dialogue, and we install a community meteorological measurement network with manual stations. So we can test the water level, water quality, or vegetation. All this is connected to meteorological data measured at a local level and meteorological data level measured by satellites. So setting up community monitoring systems means training the community, understanding what technologies are more adequate to the context. For example, we have internet availability, literacy. We have to choose risk indicators for natural resources that are scientifically valid and understood by the community. And to do assessments of data. Have the final end users and institutions, and to ease communication, dissemination of communication among the different users. Thank you, Elena. Yes, community technology work is an ongoing initiative. It's very, what you have said is very interesting, as well as other comments that have been made. So now we give the floor to Patrick Thompson from the University of Oxford. Patrick will be the last speaker. It's an honor to have you here. You have the floor.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me? Good. Okay. Estudié español en escuela, pero estoy típicamente británico, así presentaré en inglés. Okay. So firstly, thank you very much for inviting me here to talk at this virtual forum, and it's a great opportunity to share my work, and I recognize we're getting towards the end of the day, so thank you everyone for still being here. I really like the title of this forum because it was Technological and Social Solutions and Innovations, and it had technological and social together, which, like I think everyone else here, I really believe these two go hand in hand, and also having this forum situating water in its wider cultural and spiritual context is also great. So I mean, technological innovations on their own can be really clever and impressive, but only when they support social systems and innovations can they actually be enablers of any real change. So I hope what I present today will sort of contribute to this. And I've noted from earlier that Adriano talked about saying about asymmetry of information. Jaime said information is the foundation of any management system, and that's what I'll be talking about. Some of the work I've been doing in Kenya, which is a technological and social innovation combined. So my background is that I'm a professional engineer, and I used to work in the aerospace industry. Then I went into international development for a little bit over 5 years. And it was when I was doing that job that I found all sorts of water issues that the communities I was working with were having to deal with. So I returned to the UK around 10 years ago, and I've ended up in my current job as a university researcher at Oxford School of Geography and the Environment, working on small-scale community water sustainability and the public health implications of that. So my work is really to do with groundwater, which is the water that's held in the rock beneath our feet. And in particular, it's the groundwater that is then pumped out of the ground by simple hand pumps. And the process of recharge, as I'm sure most of you know, that as the water goes into the ground, it's filtered by the rock, so it can be pumped out and drunk with oftentimes no additional treatment. So it becomes a very safe source to drink, certainly much safer than river water or such like. And if the groundwater is, say, less than 100 meters below the surface, 100 meters deep, it can be pumped out with a manual hand pump just by pumping action. So For decades, NGOs and development agencies have drilled wells and installed these hand pumps across sub-Saharan Africa and across Asia too, and then handed them over to communities for the communities to manage themselves. And this community management model has been really the main way that rural water supply has been run since the 1980s. But the performance has been mixed, to say the least. In some cases, for the breakdown or lack of a simple washer that may cost a few dollars, the pumps remain broken for weeks or even months. And when that happens, the communities may have to either walk to much further away safe water source or resort to drinking water from rivers or streams, which is much less safe to drink. And this has really detrimental effects on health and well-being, and really increases the burden of water collection, which generally falls on women and girls. So the idea behind the Smart Hand Pumps project, which is what I lead here in Oxford, is that, and this again speaks to what others have said, one of the reasons that these long downtimes was that the information about which pumps were broken was not getting to the right people, the people who could repair them. So the technological side of this innovation has been that I designed a device that fits onto a hand pump, monitors its use, and then transmits over the phone network information about pump use, whether it's working or not. So collated in one place, you can see which pumps are working, which pumps are broken. And this innovation has been enabled by the mobile phone network, which now reaches places where there's no other formal infrastructure, no roads, no electricity, such like. So it gets, not everywhere, but sort of, getting there. So designing something that fits onto a pump and can be installed and left for over a year in that environment isn't trivial. That's an engineering challenge, but it's not really the interesting part, because bits and bytes of data don't repair pumps. They're just information. But if all those bits and bytes of data get to the right place, to the right person, they can repair a pump, because they can get to the mechanics who have the tools and the training and the skills to make repairs quickly. So we set up a social enterprise to use this information to be able to undertake rapid repairs. So the communities who own these pumps, they still own their pumps and they're still responsible for the pump, but they can choose to subcontract the repairs, the maintenance, to this service provider. And this service provider is heavily subsidized. But my view is that the contracting element is extremely important for reasons I will get on to in a minute. So in many cases, when the pump was handed over to the community after installation, the only further support they might get would be from an NGO or perhaps government agency coming to fix the pump at a later date. And the community in question would have virtually no say, if and when this repair and maintenance was to take place. So the decision to fix a pump would be decided by someone like me sitting in an office in somewhere like Oxford, no doubt in good faith and with good motivation. But aside from the fact that this would not be responding immediately to a broken pump as soon as it breaks, it's an incredibly asymmetric relationship. The pump may be fixed eventually under that community management model, that sort of aid development NGO model, but I think it's really problematic in terms of the dignity it affords the community, because say a northern NGO is bestowing its expertise, its largesse, and its goodwill on this community, which is lucky to have this repair made. And I'm exaggerating a bit, but there's a really unequal power dynamic here. Whereas when the community in question has a contractual relationship with the local maintenance provider, it's much more equitable, because they're paying for a service, and the service provider then has an obligation to undertake the service and perform. So in the case that we've set up, it's called Fundi Fix, because we're working in Kenya, and Fundi is the Swahili word for mechanic. The repair is guaranteed within 3 days. So if that repair is not finished within 3 days, the community get the money back. So the contractual relationship is a much more equitable one. And it's also worth noting at this point that because I know we've talked earlier on in the forum about privatization of water and some of the how that can be problematic, is that here we're only talking about a maintenance service that is, communities can voluntarily contract with, agree to, and that the pump is not privatized, the water is not privatized, and I think that's extremely important. There's no way that this organization Punifix is owning or providing the water to the community. It's fixing their means of getting that water, so it's contributing to them rather than taking control. And it's also, I think, worth pointing out in terms of, as we're talking about technological and social innovations, is that this relationship, this idea of using data to inform a more efficient and well-funded maintenance service is agnostic to the technology. So we happen to be using, doing it with hand pumps, which I think is very, very necessary given the performance of some of these pumps. But it can work with anything. So as communities move over to using solar pumps, which are becoming more common, or other things, the same idea can translate across. And this, I believe, much more equal relationship is very similar to the relationship that I have, and I'm sure most people on this webinar have, the relationship with their water provider. So in the UK, I have a water provider that I pay a subscription to, and they come and maintain the water infrastructure. And one community, I mean, this is an anecdote, it's not data, but one community I spoke to, they were clearly really thrilled that the fact they were signing a contract almost as much as they were thrilled by the fact their pump was being repaired, because they really felt that really put them in a much better situation than just being there at the sort of the whim of an NGO coming in. So I think this sort of takes also to the real core of these forums, is that the right to water, to the right to hope, in that the communities that we're dealing with, I'm talking about it, that we work with in Kenya, they don't have the same level of water service that I enjoy. Far from it. I get pipe treated water to my home, but if you have the institutional and social arrangements that they have to maintain their infrastructure is much more similar to what we have, I feel there's a much more realistic pathway to getting to the same sort of level and sort of reaching, our aims with the Sustainable Development Goals of, water for all by 2030, which is admittedly optimistic. And I think that rather than being empowered by being told how you can fix your pump and having a little bit of training, which is what happened on the old model, empowerment is sometimes used as a way of, I think, perhaps slightly cynically, of pushing risk down onto the people who are perhaps least able to manage and deal with that risk. So I prefer to think about the dignity of the relationships that people have, rather than the idea of empowerment, which I'm not so keen on, as it were. And I think, and this goes back to the very, very early point. I think, I can't remember who it was, but someone said, if it's not included in the budget, it's a speech object, not a right. And I think there is an acknowledged tension between human right to water and the financial sustainability of achieving universal access. And I think it's a healthy tension, it's not a conflict. And I do think that thinking about the relationships between the different actors, be they communities, private sector, government, and thinking about those relationships is a good way of dealing with that tension in a way that moves everyone towards, I think, the goal that we probably all have. So I think, because we're coming to the end of the afternoon, I think I will wrap up there and hand over to questions, but I hope that's been useful. And yeah, look forward to discussions.
Thank you, Patrick. We are going to round off this talk. It's interesting to understand the relationship between the governments and the community. It's not an ideal relationship. We have to understand an action related to maintenance of policy of vital input for the water sanitation management, like the case of pumps Patrick refer to, and this can be associated to the arguments. It has to do with the reduction of risk and disasters, and we have to build a dialogue in community. This approach made by Hector and Jaime, on the other hand, the role of the university in the production of the social role of knowledge, and Diego's approach that shows a different view to what we understand regarding the putting in practice an idea, and has to do with understanding water from a political and philosophical point of view, not only regarding the model to apply. Our Adriano's ideas and this view about the private and public settings, the systemic argument, the circular economy, and the poetical approach mentioned by Alfredo. As Pope Francis said, with little we can do much. And we have done much in this seminar. Your knowledge has contributed to strategic associations. This idea that technology is not means but a medium involves another view and makes us more humane. I have a proposal to make, because your voices are more interesting. Can you express one notion or one idea about this forum so that we don't overlap? Okay, let's start by the ladies. Elena, you can give some remarks. Thank you, Luis. I think you speak much better than us, but we found it very important to have dialogue, to share knowledge, experiences. I hope each one of us can contribute its best to what we have learned today. Thank you very much. Now, Adriano.
Open here. So I'd like to repeat a quote from Darwin that I've been using a lot these days. That is, it's not the most strongest that survive, but the most adaptable. So I think it's all about that. With this innovation and technological things, we are learning how to share and compart experience, and learning from the other. We can make ourselves more adaptable to this new present, I would say. So thanks a lot.
No, I think this has been a wonderful day. Thank you so much for organising it. And I think that for me, the way technology and the social interact is that the technology gives us opportunities to do the things we want to do with that affect people's lives. They are absolutely the means to the end, not the ends in themselves.
Thank you, Patrick. Diego? In these meetings, what is important in the discussion is that there has been interaction. As a last remark, we want to take into account that solutions are not magical. We have to use our mind. It's very important to use our mind. Thank you, Diego. Sure. Then Christian, I agree with Diego. For me, the most important thing is a cross-sectional approach of this forum, and I think all of your fora have this approach. And each day I am more focused on technology and data, but I really enjoyed seeing the other views. So thank you very much. Now, Christian, the floor is yours. And I want to thank you for this forum. This forum allows us to exchange ideas with several ideas and notions, and we have a large challenge ahead, that we can be more sustainable over time, that people have access to water, and that allows us to exchange experiences and be more efficient with innovating solutions, and to educate and train young people. Thank you, Christian. What you are saying is in tune with the next meeting, New Paradigms for Environmental Rights. We are going to go back to Thursdays. It will be Thursday 25th. I might be making a mistake. But of course, we are going to understand that all the fora are intertwined. That was a proposal for this year in light of this meeting. We are going to do it in other cities too. So Gabriela, you have the floor. Thank you, Luis. And that has to do with an organizational issue. Well, so you've seen that Gabriela allowed you to say that. But as being the one that selected the date, we haven't been able to change it. So there was a problem with the flights. As Patrick mentioned before, Hector and Adriano, first of all, there is so much generosity from all participants and speakers to share their knowledge and to think together about specific solutions. And the different disciplines can work together to search for solutions so that we can improve the lives of the most vulnerable people. Thank you, Luis. Okay, thank you very much, all of you. We will be meeting on August 25th. Bye-bye.